This is part 4 of our 5-part video series, how to be an extraordinary life coach and build a thriving coaching business. This video right here breaks down what I think is the single most important concept to understand that'll be a game changer for you as a transformational coach. The whole high level idea here is that there are 14 ingredients and 2 main coaching concepts that you need to understand if you're going to change a life. And if you don't understand how to change a life, then you're really not going to be as impactful of a coach as not only you could be, but what your seekers need. And so the best way to build a really good coaching business is to be a really good coach. And our society has been traumatized and polarized and upended in so many ways that I think what we need are people that really fully understand the depths of human behavior and how to change lives and how to regain some of the stability back, right? So I'm not going to go into much depth at all with the concepts that we've already taught, but just a super fast recap. You want more, you can go watch those videos, but I want to get to today's content. The first 10 things that we talked about, the ingredients are: number 1, experiences. That's what's happened to you. Number 2, memories. That's how you remember what's happened to you. Experiences cannot change. Memories cannot not change, really. As we evolve in our lives, we're constantly changing our memories. The third thing is perceptions. That's our viewpoint. How do we see the world? What are your clients' model of the world? What's yours? Number 4 is attitudes. At a neurological level, what's our state of mind? What's our state of body? And our attitude will alter our perceptions and so many of the other things that that can be changed, our choices, all the stuff. Number 5, thoughts. That's your head talk, your judgments inside, all the things that is going on internally, your internal dialogue, how you think about yourself, what you say to yourself. Number 6, emotions. These are the physical sensations that we experience, as well as the labels that we try to use to express those experiences, to understand them. Number 7 is decisions. These are the choices that we make. Every single decision can be dissected and pulled apart and try to understand, why are we making these decisions? And most of our decisions are geared toward the avoidance of danger. Number 8, beliefs. I went deeper into beliefs than I thought I was going to, and some things crystallized in a way that I hadn't even made connections with. But beliefs essentially are simultaneously given too much credit and not enough. If you want me to explain that, go watch the video. The 9th one is values. This is what we value, what's important to us, who is important to us, what experiences are important to us. Every choice we make is a values choice. It's just most of us aren't conscious of the values that are driving our choices. And speaking of that, the 10th one is drivers. And that is kind of a culmination of all of these things, but essentially it's what is driving all of the things that we do. And in transformational coaching, we need to understand the human underneath the behavior. If we don't understand the human underneath the behavior, we're not really going to be able to change that human's behavior, at least long lasting. So in today's video, I just want to do 2 more ingredients and 1 overall coaching concept. Take a big breath on this one. The first ingredient that I want to speak to is something called meta programs. I don't know that it is only a neuro-linguistic programming concept. I learned it in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. Many of you are familiar with that. I'm sure the concept, spans various fields, not just NLP. But what meta programs essentially means, first of all, meta means macro. These are the huge programs that are operating in our life. So we talk a lot and we focus a lot on the micro programs of what are our beliefs about money and what are our beliefs about love and relationships and body and all those things. And all of those are important. However, I never knew these meta programs existed until I learned through my certification that they exist. I kind of usually think of it as like a puppet master. Like there's something way above us that is pulling strings in macro areas. So these meta programs are determining so much of how we interact with the world and other people and how we see everything around us before some of the micro programs get to us, right? Like I put all these glasses on the other day, and we've got all these micro programs, but before we even get there, there's this macro filter, like a big windshield maybe. And things need to pass through that windshield before they even get to our lenses. And it's those meta programs, or the big micro or macro rather programming, that really determine how we perceive the world in a big way. Like this is such fundamental programming that it's unconscious for us, because it's just the way that we see things. And I'm sure, I would imagine all of you've been in a conversation with somebody that may have turned into a conflict, or may have turned into an argument, may have ended a relationship, where you both were essentially looking at the same thing and arguing over who was seeing it the right way, or remembering something from the past, maybe an experience you guys had, and arguing over which person is right and which person is wrong. When you understand meta programs, one of the big takeaways is that most of the time, both people are right. It's just that they're coming at it from such wildly different perspectives and different meta programs, that if I use my meta programs to try to understand how you're viewing the world with your meta programs that are different than mine, I literally cannot do that, because I am looking through different lenses, trying to understand why you don't see through your lenses what I see through my different lenses. This is one of the reasons that so many people have conflict that never gets actually addressed, because we don't understand the existence of these programs, but we really don't understand the power of them. And when we do, I promise you, it just makes life easier, because now it's like, I just got this image of, I don't know if I can explain this well, but you can be zoomed in on a picture, right? And then you zoom out on the picture and you see more things around the picture. And then you zoom out on the picture even more and you see more things. And some of the things that you saw when you were just zoomed in don't make sense until you zoom out and go, oh, well, they're in a cave. So now that makes sense, why they look like that, or why they're dressed like that, or why the shadow looks like that. And then you zoom out even further and you see where that cave actually is. And, you just continue to see the surroundings getting bigger and bigger. When we continue to zoom out and we see the meta programs, then so many of the things inside that we get focused on and frustrated by now make sense. And they can make sense for ourselves, or they can make sense for our clients. They can make sense in relationships. So these meta programs are liberating. I mean, they will free you, and they will help you free your clients, either from the actual struggle by like cutting the cord on the meta programs that are holding us back, or they will stop us from abusing ourselves out of ignorance, because we just don't understand. We don't understand that we're programmed in a certain way, but we want to operate this way. And this programming won't allow us to operate this way, but we think we're at fault because that's what generally we're taught by society, instead of, oh, this is a meta program. And if I just change the meta program, then I can actually move differently in the world. So meta programs are so big in scope, but significance, that if we don't really fully understand the arena that somebody's playing in, it's like a fishbowl, right? I do carry a fishbowl around with me everywhere I go, because you never know, right? You never know when you're just going to have a fish and you need a bowl. Uh, what you can do with this capacity, this fishbowl, is different than what you can do with this one, because this one has a bigger space. It just has bigger capacity. And so what so many of us are doing is we are not understanding that inside this fishbowl, we have a limited amount of growth available. We have a limited amount of success available. We have a limited amount of love available for us to access. That doesn't mean that there's not more available around it, but while we're trapped in the fishbowl, we can't access that stuff outside of it. And so many of you, maybe you've experienced some version of where it feels like, you can see something, but you can't touch it, right? It's like you're window shopping on the dreams of your soul, but your capacity won't allow you to touch it because you're up against this barrier. Meta programs allows us to see the barriers and allows us to break the barriers, but understanding what built the barriers and understanding that it's not the fish's fault. When a fish gets sick, they don't treat the fish. As far as I know, they don't, there's no like injection that they put inside the fish. They treat the water. They change whatever's going on in the tank, because the fish is really just a representation of all the surroundings of the tank, right? So that's kind of what meta programs is like. We take a look at the meta programs that are determining this human's experience, and what if we could change the meta programs instead of just getting frustrated by the human or using force or shame or whatever other methods that we tend to use to try to change our behavior. So that's the overall concept of meta programs. I want to give you one or two examples. One of the most common things that we use in coaching, that we notice in coaching, is something called a direction filter. And what that means is, are we motivated towards something or are we motivated away from something? Now, meta programs can be contextual, meaning we might be motivated towards something in one area of our life, but away from something in another area of our life. So we don't have the same meta program in all the areas of our lives. So when we understand the bigness of meta programs, then we still got to go down and see the relationship that we have to all these different areas of our lives. But let's take money, for instance. Most people actually, in my experience, are motivated away from when it comes to money. I know I am. I still am. I know I have that programming. I don't want to be broke. I don't want to be poor. I grew up in an environment where we didn't have a whole lot of money and I didn't like it. So I want to not experience what I didn't like. Remember, one of the things that we said about the way our intellect works is we're always chasing the not. I wanted to be not broke. I wanted to be not poor. That was my whole motivation. And a lot of people, when we open this up, realize that this is their motivation too, especially around money. So what that means is we actually don't have future-driven goals where we're moving towards something. We're just moving away from broke. We're moving away from poor. We're moving away from having our credit cards declined. We're moving, oh shit, that just lit some stuff up for me. Because I remember. I won't tell the story now, just because of time. But I just cycled through maybe a half a dozen times where I felt not just the decline of the credit card, I felt the fear of the credit card being declined. And then when it didn't get declined, it was like, oh my God, thank you. But then the next time somebody was going to swipe it, the same fear all over again. So we have, this is going to be interesting because what just happened to me is going to lead into the second concept, or the second ingredient that we talk about. We have these motivations. And I also realized very recently that when I started my business, I started it to pay the bills. I remember, and I told this story so many times, that I said, if there's a way for me to pay the bills and not have to leave my brand new daughter, my young daughter, then that's what I want to create. And so I built a business that was able to pay the bills. I didn't get into this business to say, I want to make $10 million, or I want to build this, this kind of business. And I mean, I had some of those thoughts, but that actually wasn't my drive. My drive was to be able to pay the bills. So whenever my business got to the point where I could pay the bills, I stopped. I took my foot off the gas, because I was actually driven by just not being poor, not being broke, not being able to not pay my bills. Please let me know if this is landing for you, that you're not alone, if this is giving you some awareness, because we have to understand this stuff. This is really big in relationships also. Most people actually don't know what they really want in relationships, but they're very clear what they don't want. And when you ask somebody, what is it that you want in a relationship? I would say, in my experience, at least 7 times out of 10, they'll give you a list of all the things they don't want, which is fine. We have to understand that piece. But then we got to know, what do you want? We need to know what we won't tolerate anymore, but we also know, what are you searching for? Because a lot of people in relationships or financial opportunities, we actually have the things that we want all around us, but because of our meta program, we're focused on what we don't want. We don't actually see what we do want because we're not aware of what we actually do want. That's how this particular meta program operates in so many of our lives. And so from a coaching standpoint, we need to understand that the mind loves targets. If our target is move away from the fire, as soon as we're far enough from the fire that it's not burning us anymore, but we don't have another target that says move toward that goal, move toward that dream, move toward that relationship, all we're going to do is just be far enough away from the fire to be cool with it. All right, now I'm good. Now I'm not getting burned. But we have our backs turned, literally, we have our backs turned on our goals. So we need to understand these two levers of human motivation and use them appropriately. The only other meta program that I want to speak to real briefly here is a meta program called the action filter. And I'm just going to teach it in an analogy, and then I'm going to move on to this other ingredient. We have, we are programmed as packers or jumpers. Imagine you're on a cliff and you want to jump off the cliff, and you've got a parachute, and you're going to open up the parachute and then enjoy this experience of you're parachuting off a cliff, right? There are certain people, I'm one of them, that sees the opportunity and just jumps. There are other people that sees the opportunity and then packs the parachute. And then once the parachute is packed, they open up, they pull the ripcord, make sure the parachute works. And then after it works, they pack it again. But then they want to make sure it works this time too. So they pull the ripcord and make sure it works. And then they pack it again. And then they pull the ripcord and then they pack it again. At the edge of this extreme, they don't ever jump because they're so focused on packing the parachute. They want to be uber prepared. They want to make sure they got all the things, all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted. By that time, I've already splatted on the ground. I've jumped and halfway down go, oh shit, I didn't pack a parachute. So both extremes are dangerous. They're just dangerous for different reasons, right? This action filter is what causes people to take action. Do we just jump at the opportunity, or do we wait to take action until we know that everything is going to go right, that there's no risk for danger anymore, right? And then, of course, there's all kinds of areas in between those two extremes. But those are two examples of meta programs that we have to understand if we really want to help somebody change their life at a foundational and at a fundamental level. I'm going to stop there on meta programs. It's a deep, deep concept. When we teach it in our certification programs, it's hours that we use to teach about a dozen of these concepts. And but it's fundamentally life-changing. The second concept I want to talk about in this video, which is the 12th, not concept, but the 12th ingredient. The second ingredient here is trauma. And so it's interesting. I didn't plan on this, but I was just traumatized literally when I told the credit card story. I mean, I felt it in my body. I started to well up with tears. I could have just burst out into tears if I would have just chased that thought. So let's talk about trauma. For the purposes of this conversation, I want to make a distinction that is a working definition that we use in coaching. This is not necessarily a psychiatric or psychological or therapeutic definition of trauma. I don't know what those are. We could find them pretty easily, I'm sure. There's a manual, the DSM-R manual, I think, that explains all that stuff. This is not that. And I've not been trained in therapy or psychiatry or that kind of psychology. I just want to give you the working definition that we use all the time, that we understand and use in neurological coaching, in neurotransformational coaching. And that is, there are traumatic experiences and then there's trauma. A traumatic experience is something that happened in our lives that was adverse in nature. So it's an adversarial event. It's an event of adversity. Basically, what that means is we had expectations that weren't met. It could be that we wanted to be able to attend a certain birthday party and we couldn't, or we wanted to go to a school and we moved and had to go to a different school, or it could be an extremely intense emotional event like abuse or the death of somebody. But the experience itself is the experience. It's a traumatic experience. Trauma, the way I'm using it, trauma is how we relate to that experience and how we replay that experience over and over and over and over again. So two different people can have the same traumatic experiences, but not have the same trauma. The way I'm using it, not have the same relationship to those experiences. So the reason I think of trauma this way is because I believe that trauma is not a category of experience. I don't think that we have good experiences and not so good experiences and bad experiences and trauma experiences. I don't personally believe that because I don't know where to draw the lines. And why is one person's bad experience different than, or why is my experience in the bad category, but their experience in the trauma category? I don't know where to draw the line. So the way my mind works, and in all my experience of coaching, I want to think of trauma, and I suggest you think of trauma as a spectrum. So then the intensity changes. But traumatic experience by itself, our relationship to adversarial events, to adversity, is the through line. The intensity of the experience and how we continue to relate to the experience, that's the trauma spectrum, the way I think about it and the way we talk about it and teach it in our certification programs. And if you are willing to believe that and run with me here on this, then what we have is micro trauma all the way to macro trauma, and then a bunch of things in between. The reason this is so critical to understand is because I think in society, we don't really talk about trauma all that much, partly because I don't think we know how to deal with trauma. I mean, we're programmed as humans not to have emotions at all, so let alone traumatic experiences and trauma emotions, right? So the only trauma that is somewhat okay for us to deal with tends to be what I'm calling macro trauma, the big stuff, the death and the abuse and the grief and all of the big stuff. And a lot of us don't even want to deal with the big stuff because it's uncomfortable and all the things that make us want to resist that. But then what about the micro traumas? What about the breakup of your first love? What about the moving 30 times? I was just on the phone with somebody the other day that has moved 44 times in 4 years. What about all of the micro experiences of your best friend betraying you when you were 7 years old, or somebody taking a toy away, or my micro trauma of my credit cards being declined, or my fear of them being declined? Those are micro traumas. And the reason I think this is so critical is because if we don't validate the entire experience of trauma, then we probably won't address it. If the micro traumas are just things that we disrespect or we dismiss, because those are just little things, I'm dealing with the big things. If we don't deal with the little things, they will take us over. I think that for many of us, maybe most of us, our micro traumas are actually causing much bigger damage than our macro traumas because they're not being addressed. And if we don't address our micro traumas, our relationship to adversity, then we will be ill prepared to handle any micro traumas going forward because we haven't handled the ones that we're still carrying around. And it's the buildup of the fear of what if things don't go the way I hope they go, or I expect them to go, or I'm prepared for. If they don't go that way, then what do? It's like dying from a 1,000 tiny small cuts, right? The kind of trauma that we think of is like the big wounds, somebody, like a bullet wound or a huge stab wound. But what about the cuts? What about the little tiny cuts that over time will also cause us to bleed out? Because there's enough little experiences of small blood that will also remove all the blood from our body, right? So from a macro perspective, micro traumas, I think, are a bigger problem for most people because of the buildup and because of what it creates in our future pacing than the macro traumas. Now, in no way am I trying to dismiss. Please, if that's the way it sounds, please hear my heart. That's not my intentions, to dismiss the big traumatic events that we generally hold on to as traumas. That's not my point. They are both extremely valid. What I'm saying is that one of them tends to get treated and addressed, and the rest end up not being treated and addressed. And what I think we need to understand is that this trauma of all kind is embodied. And so what just came up out of me is a bunch of micro experiences that produced an emotional reaction that's trapped in my body. And it was, I remembered being in the drive-thru at Carl's Jr. That was the memory that just like shut me down for a moment and created some tears. So it's the lack of willingness to address or embodied ability to address all of our trauma, regardless of where it lands on the spectrum, that will determine how we think about and how we relate to and how we interact with our future experiences. And we can't do this intellectually. You can't just go, well, I'm older now, so all of that stuff doesn't matter. For me, and what just came out of me a little bit ago, I can't say, well, my credit cards don't get declined anymore, so let's just forget about that. I mean, I just had that trauma like within a few days ago, and there's no chance my credit card is going to get declined. Zero chance. But I felt it. So even when our realities change and our circumstances change and the thing that used to be real is no longer real, the trauma can still live in our bodies. And if the trauma lives in our bodies, then our bodies will, to a large degree, control what we have permission to do or not do. So there's this concept that I think is so critical for us to understand if you want to be a transformational coach, that most humans are intellectually prepared, but neurologically scared. We're intellectually prepared. We know what to do, what to say, what not to say from an intellectual level, but then our body shuts us down. When we have the opportunity to speak on stage or to ask somebody for money or to pitch our programs or whatever, our body shuts us down. So the main question is, what is your neurological relationship to adversity? If your neurological relationship to adversity is one of fear and resistance and hesitation, then that will, to a large degree, determine your willingness to take risks in the future. your willingness to go on the path that's not perfectly paved. And what that means is if we are not neurologically prepared to deal with adversity, to deal with risk, to deal with uncertainty, then the only thing that's safe to our body is comfort. So anything that's comfortable, we're safe with, and our bodies will say, okay, we can go down that path. But anything that's not safe to the intellect, our bodies go, no, we can't go down that path. And that's one of the main deep reasons that people struggle so much, that we have goals and dreams and preparation and all the stuff that we want in our lives, but we just feel like we can't do it. We feel like we can't do it. That's our embodied trauma going, I don't know about that. So please, again, if this is landing for you, if you're recognizing an area in your life maybe that you are intellectually prepared but neurologically scared, even if it doesn't feel like fear, you just feel hesitation. You set yourself up to do things and you just don't do them. You go to push the button on Facebook Live or a YouTube video or to write an article and you don't want to publish it or whatever because your body just comes up with a reason for you to not do a thing that you want to do. If there's something that you want to do and you don't do it, I promise you, this is why. You want to do it and you're probably intellectually prepared, but your body is saying no for some reason. And if we don't address why our bodies are not allowing us to do the things that we want to do, we'll never be able to fully commit to the life that we want. We'll never be able to give ourselves permission to take the risks that will give us the experiences that we want. So, man, these two ingredients are massive. I think, and I hope you can tell, they're massive. But the beautiful thing is, as big as they are, they're actually extremely simple. It's just that we've built so many things on top of them that it looks like and feels like massive complication. But it's actually extremely and shockingly simple when we fully understand this. The final thing I want to share with you in this video, and it's going to be quick, it's how you use, so this is the concept, right? The premise of these 5 videos of how to change a life. There are 14 ingredients and 2 concepts. This is the first overall concept. I've given you 12 ingredients so far. This is the first overall concept. And this is really about how you use these ingredients. The coaching concept is whoever has the problem has the solution. Whoever has the problem has the solution. So, your job as a coach is not to bring all the answers. Your job as the coach is to bring all the questions. And that is so liberating, you guys. Because now you don't need to know what somebody else is going to ask, so that you can be intellectually prepared with all the questions to answer, rather, all the answers to their questions. You just need to understand these fundamental concepts and know how to question, because they have the answers. And the best thing you can do as a coach is to show up with ferocious, informed curiosity. Ferocious curiosity, that's the energy that you bring. Informed, that's understanding all these concepts that we're talking about. And curiosity, exploring, looking at different angles, asking questions from all the different vantage points. That is the essential energetic concept and space to hold when you want to transform a human life. Now, you can't just be ferociously curious, and you can't just be informed. You have to be both. When you're informed with how the brain actually works, then your curiosity can ask the right questions based on what's happening in the moment, based on your understanding of how beliefs work and how values conflicts work, and now how meta programs work and how traumas work and how experiences are and how memories work and all the things that we're talking about. You can be informed about all those concepts and go, okay, now let's ask some questions. And you don't ever have to teach anybody any of the concepts or any of the ingredients. You don't have to teach anybody any of the rules. You don't have to teach anything. You don't ever have to pull out a flip chart and go, okay, here's the thing. We're going to give you these 4 quadrants, and you need to understand this about yourself and this about yourself, and you are this kind of a personality. You don't need to teach anything. We hardly ever do in our coaching. But with the information at a deep level and the curiosity, we ask questions, and then people find their answers and untie their own knots with our support. You're not going in and untying anybody else's knot. You can't do that, nor should you. You're not bringing your buffet of answers and giving it to them whenever they have a question. Well, here's what you should do because this is what I did. You're just asking questions. Ferocious, I have to say furious, ferocious, informed curiosity. That is an extremely powerful neurotransformational coaching trait. You're almost there. You're so close. Just watch part 5 right there and you'll be done with the entire series. This is where most people quit. And it genuinely pains me to say that because it's where most people are closest to the answers.